I do make mention a lot that my go-to speakers at the moment, the Anker Motion Plus Bluetooth speaker, the Sony XB40, is 2 years old. There is still a surprising amount of interest in the speaker. There's been one model update since then, the Sony XB41. Doesn't seem to be an improvement at all on the Sony XB40. And when I say my go-to, I'm not saying these are the best speakers I've got. I would still say my mini rigs in 2.2, when you go through the hassle of setting them up, can produce the best sound, the nearest to a proper hi-fi setup that I have currently got in a portable system. But in terms of their size, their user-friendly form factor, their all-round sound ability, what they can produce, for me, the safest options and the ones I go to the most, I still use all my speakers, I got to put that out there. They all offer something, but my favourites are the Anker Motion Plus, the Sony XB40. I thought it would be useful, because people have asked for it, to compare not just the XB40 against the Motion Plus, which has been taken on all comers. I did already do a video showing it against the Xtreme 2. I'm going to do it again, because I do think of the XB40 as being something in between the JBL Charge size and the JBL Xtreme size. For me, that's still a little bit big for travel, for being a handy take anywhere room to room size, whereas the XB40, it's still hand holdable. It's still that very user-friendly form factor. So I just wanted to revisit my old friend and see where it stands with the newer speakers. Sony XB40, now 2 years old. Xtreme 2, a year old. Motion Plus is the new kid on the block. Just to quickly go over the main differences between these speakers. IPX67 for Xtreme 2 Motion Plus, IPX5, which means you can submerge these two speakers. It's only basically splash resistant for the XB40. That's not a big deal to me. In terms of actual ratings, 40 watts on AC power. Someone's pointed out, yeah, but it's actually DC power. Yes, the power it actually receives at its input end is DC because it goes through a transformer. I talk about AC because you plug it into an AC outlet. I didn't know it would become a point of contention. 30 watts, 40 watts AC, 30 watts on battery, 40 watts. But it's 30 watts on the Anker Motion Plus, seems to be right up there with even 40 watts on the Xtreme 2 and the Xtreme 1. Goes louder. In my last video, I think it was, where I tested the loudness. Being the new speaker, the Anker is Bluetooth 5, the other two are Bluetooth 4.2. The Sony, as I said, I think of as an in-between speaker, where I don't think there is, a similar model on the other lineups. As I said, in between a JBL Charge size, then next up being the Xtreme, and I think of it as something in between those two, which is a perfect size for me. It is actually 1,500 grams, basically 1 kilo, 1,000 grams, 2.5 kilos. The Xtreme 2 is noticeably heavier than the other two speakers. The XB40, again, in between these other sizes of speakers, not just in its actual size, but in its actual weight. In terms of the chargers, 10 watt charger, 21 watt charger, 57 watt charger on the JBL Xtreme 2. But of course, it's proprietary plug-in, USB-C, lovely. Surprisingly, it's the older speaker that is the only one of these three that has NFC pairing. These are the main differences, other than the sound, of course, and that's all about what I'm going to try and show you, the differences in sound and where the XB40 sits in with these new kids on the block. Slightly an old timer, but still a go-to for many people looking for a decent bass. The Xtreme 2, it seems to be overlooked, the Sony XB40, and because it is my go-to along with the Anker Motion Plus now, I thought I'd put it out there, my own thoughts and why it's one of my go-to. Apart from also, when I'm talking about the differences, of course, it's the only one of these three that has pretty lights on the front. I need to point out, I am using custom settings. JBL Xtreme, of course, does not have any option to embed EQ settings into the speaker. After many years of the JBL app, they've decided to not even bother to give you the choice to embed your own settings or change the settings for the sound in any way. I'm using my custom settings on the Soundcore Motion Plus and custom settings on the Sony. Now, I have to say, the Sony is a bugger to EQ for because it changes with every step with the volume. So I've tried to make it simple, and you'll find in my tests I've got treble at +10, I've got mids at +2, and I'm only doing two things. I'm changing the bass EQ with volume, and I'm switching on extra bass at the appropriate volume. In reality, you would start off at lower volumes, pushing mids higher than that, having treble at its maximum, and coming off slightly with each further step of the volume till the higher volumes, treble, at your liking, and mids could actually be towards negative if you were trying to have a balanced sound. Obviously, you're doing this to how it suits your taste, but I'm saying I'm trying to keep it balanced. So just to point out, this test is with my own EQ settings, which I will show you along with the clip. So at 33%. Motion Plus XB40 Xtreme 2. I've normalized them to about the same RMS average volume. The difference is in sound. The Motion Plus has an open, detailed sound. The XB40 sounds quite a powerful sounding and thicker sounding speaker, not as open as the Motion Plus. The Xtreme 2 has a very rumbly, nice bass, but lacks it elsewhere. The Motion Plus in the bass, 60 Hz around there, 20.6, 14.2 for the XB40. Means in the real lower bass, the XB40 has a 6 decibel advantage, even when the volumes are about the same. You have loads more headroom in the XB40. Don't forget, I've got this even on the custom EQ settings, trying to get it quite flat. Means 0 on the bass, and that could have gone to +10. But I'm trying to keep them balanced sounding. XB40 with my custom setting is heavier in the upper bass, so it retains some punch and some weight to the bass. The lower bass won't go any higher. As you can see, -19 upper bass, 22 on the XB40. So that is not, so it is slightly overboosted with my custom settings on the Motion Plus, but it still ends up being the most balanced I could get it. The Xtreme 2, 13.6 to 14.2. It's a little bit heavier in the bass at 33% volume. If you get the volumes about the same, I've got to say the XB40 does play a bit louder, but the Xtreme 2 sounds pretty veiled compared to the other two. You've got no headroom on the Xtreme 2 if we're talking about embedding EQ settings. So I did have the Sony there in flat mode, bass at 0. So I've not taken the bass any further than in its native state. There is a lot of headroom. I could have pushed that bass, you know, and I could have turned it into a boombox if I wanted. I'm keeping it balanced. You can't do anything with the Xtreme 2. I'm already flat out with my settings for the Anker Motion Plus. So now I'm going to show you at what I consider to be normal listening volumes. For me, it's a sort of volume where I'm normally sitting around 66%.
Looks like we've come to the end of the road. There's no point in running away now. I'd rather sleep until the storm is gone. She'd rather be shooting at me now. I know it will end up in anger. I don't think we grew up, we just became older. She's aiming her words, ready to fire. I don't think that bullets will bring back desire. I don't think that bullets will bring back desire. Like a blink of an eye's not enough. She'd rather be staying for days now. I'd rather fix it than mess up again. She'd rather be burning it all now. I know it will end up in anger. I don't think we grew up, we just became older. She's aiming her words, ready to fire. I don't think that bullets will bring back desire.
When it hurts like this, climb the greatest heights, jump down and have a fight. And that's all we'll ever like, but that can never change my mind. When it's good, it's amazing. When it's bad, it's uneasy. I wouldn't have it another way. There's no other way. When it hurts like this,
Motion Plus, Xtreme 2, XB40. First of all, the massive difference is in the bass when it comes to the Motion Plus. Minus 23.1 Motion Plus at 57 Hz, minus 16.3 Xtreme 2, 7 decibels louder in the bass for the Xtreme 2 and goes deeper, not just louder. Bear in mind, these are normalized, so if the volume's about the same, you're getting more relative bass from the Xtreme 2. The XB40, about the same as the Xtreme 2. Xtreme 2, you've got no headroom, you cannot embed EQ settings. The XB40, I'm on +4 and I could go to +10 in the bass. There's lots of room. I'm trying to keep it balanced, but the headroom is there for more bass from the XB40. Xtreme 2, there's no embedding. Motion Plus, I'm already +6, which is the maximum for the Motion Plus in the bass. There's more upper bass for the Motion Plus. That's my EQ settings. It still sounds more balanced that way. And the difference is no deep bass on the Motion Plus, which you get from the Xtreme 2 and the XB40. But the Motion Plus is still clearer sounding, more open, more detailed. For me, Xtreme 2 still sounding a bit veiled in comparison. And the XB40, something in between the two. You can up the mids. I'm on +2 on the mids. It will help with some clarity. So the point is, there is plenty of headroom in the XB40 where there isn't in the other two speakers. I'm already maxing out the Motion Plus, high end, almost maxing out, and certainly in the bass. You could push the upper bass a bit more if you want. It's just going to be a bit unbalanced. Motion Plus is stronger in the mids. When it comes to the highs, XB40 has a higher high, but it does have a dip around the 5,000, which the Xtreme 2 doesn't, but then the Xtreme 2 tails off just as the Motion Plus does. Motion Plus falls off a cliff by 13,000 Hz. So no doubt, you know, the Xtreme 2 is all about that rumbly bass. It does have more of a rumbly bass than the XB40. You can push that XB40 much further. I've got it at +4. There's plenty of headroom there, but it's going to be more of a punchy bass, where that's going to be more of a rumbly bass. And you're either going to like or hate that. And that's why people still like the Xtreme 1. It had more punch, although it doesn't go as deep and rumbly as Xtreme 2. It's going to be a matter of taste. But in terms of rumbly, movie type bass, Xtreme 2, you know, that's where its forte is, but it still, to me, sounds a bit veiled. So that just leaves maximum volume. Need to point out here, whereas on the 33% and the 66%, I am using my custom settings where I'm pushing the bass to the top at 80 Hz, 6 decibels. But you start getting heavy distortion with that setting. So for maximum, I brought it back down to +1, where it seems to play quite nice. And actually, bringing that bass back down seems to improve the mids and the highs. See, there's nothing I can do with the JBL Xtreme. I am pushing the bass on the Sony XB40 to +10. So there's a difference. I've gone maximum on the plus side with the XB40. I can't do that unless I'm going to put up with some heavy distortion on the Motion Plus. But there's a trade-off, because although I'm bringing that bass down, I am getting better mids and highs. So how does that play out? 100% volume. So when push comes to shove, the Motion Plus still does amazingly well. It's just that it misses that lower bass. Overall, on average, minus 20 decibels, minus 19.7 for the XB40. So the XB40, just a tad louder on average overall, and a fraction, 107.5 decibels peak, 107.4 decibels peak on the Motion Plus, almost the same volume. Again, really surprised me. It's just that it misses the lower bass. 28.8 at 67 Hertz, 23.7 at 65 the XB40. 5 decibels louder in the lower bass. I mean, that's big. You know, you either hear it on the XB40 or you don't hear it at all if you're going to maximum volumes on the Motion Plus. But for its size and price, amazingly well. On the other hand, XB40, you can pick up really cheap second hand. Against the newer Xtreme 2, on average, 1.5 decibels louder than Xtreme 2. Even in the bass at maximum volume, the Xtreme 2 cannot keep up with the XB40, albeit the XB40 pushed to plus 10 in its EQ settings. It's 0.5 decibel louder and goes a fraction lower in the bass. It's slightly meatier as well as being slightly louder in the bass. The XB40, as far as peaks goes, 107.5, just 103.6, 4 decibels louder than both the XB40 and the Motion Plus. Xtreme 2 is not living up to its extreme name, but yes, it does have the most rumbling type bass, which a lot of people are going to like, but without the punch. The XB40 has more punch, and the Motion Plus is more open and detailed, albeit slightly leaner than the other two. So yeah, I've got to say, yeah, again, it has surprised me, the Motion Plus. Even bringing the bass down in terms of peak, it's almost nothing in it between that and the Sony XB40, and you know, it's only 0.5 decibel overall louder, the XB40, than the Motion Plus. So, you know, it's a much smaller speaker. It's the newer speaker. I can get a good deal. I can get this for 90 quid second hand on eBay. So in terms of potentially cheaper, well, having said that, you can get these. I've seen them on Amazon for 65 quid. At the moment, they are back up to £100. People tell me in some countries the Motion Plus is the same price as the Xtreme 2. That's bad news for you. And it's actually a bit of a shock to me if that's the case. I don't know how that works out. Either you're paying very little for your Xtreme 2 or you're paying a lot for your Motion Plus. However, in the UK, I can tell you there is a significant difference between the two. It is significantly smaller, less than half the weight of the Xtreme 2. It goes louder. Even when you plug that in to its potential 40 watts, both of these speakers are louder than the JBL Xtreme 2. So I did push there, finally, the XB40 is maximum. You could have pushed those mids, it would have gone louder, but it wouldn't have been very balanced. And actually, to get it balanced, the mids should have come down a little bit, but I've tried to keep it, you know, as easy to use settings as possible. So I'm +2 on the mids, +10 on the treble. In reality, should have come down on that treble to keep it a little bit more balanced, but the bass you have to keep pushing with each step of the volume. But the extra bass, as I said, you're going to switch on some point after 50%, depending on your taste. In flat mode, that bass does come off considerably by about 50, just over 50%. Whereas, you know, where it becomes bass light, it is a bit silly. So you switch on the extra bass to taste, and you still have to push up your bass in the EQ to keep it balanced. But overall, you're either going to agree or disagree with why I think, you know, it's still a great all-rounder, the XB40. The XB40 was not as good as the XB40, but obviously they've tried to make it waterproof, whereas this is only splash-proof. To me, the Xtreme 2, you're either going to buy it for its deep rumbly bass. It is a deep rumbly bass, although the XB40 actually goes louder. There's more rumble on the Xtreme 2. However, for me, the rest of the frequency is a bit veiled. Vocals do not pop. That's a big difference. Vocals pop on both of the XB40 and the Motion Plus, but they're more forward on the Motion Plus. Again, it's a bit of an in-between speaker, the XB40. To me, you know, there's a lot of headroom to get it to sound how you want it to sound. You can't do anything about the Xtreme 2. But I think Xtreme 2, if you like its bass, the rest of the sound is pretty safe. It's not over sharp, it's not going to do anything terrible, but it's not going to sound particularly, to me, it doesn't sound particularly melodic, I would say. I would say it's safe with very heavy bass, if that's what you want. Sony, you know, may sound a little harsh depending on whether you like its highs or not. A lot of people complain about, you know, the fact you do have to push the highs in the EQ, but they don't quite like the sound of it. But you can bring it down, and actually you should be bringing it down at the higher volumes if you want to keep it balanced. You can play around with the mids if you still want some clarity. But yeah, I mean, it's still, the Motion Plus, I would say, keeps on surprising me how it stands up to these bigger speakers, more expensive speakers. But keep it in proportion. It does not have the bass of these other two speakers. It doesn't have, you know, any significant bass below 100 hertz. Now, technically, I measured these, both the Xtreme 2 and the XB40, around 50 hertz to about 14 kilohertz. And the Motion Plus, about 60 hertz to about 12 if you're really kind to it, you know, when we're talking about plus and minus 3 decibels. But in terms of that actually rumbly, feel it bass, it's missing. That's the only thing missing from the Motion Plus. If they, that's what you keep thinking, if they just made this a bit bigger passive radiators, bigger woofers, get some rumbly bass, I mean, you think they're going to kill the market, but it is what it is. So that's my comparison. I hope you got something out of that. I hope it's made you think about the XB40 again, which does have a lot to offer. Given its second-hand price, I personally do prefer it over the Xtreme 2 because outside of the rumbly bass, there's not a lot else happening. It's not very forward sounding. It's not very clear. It's a bit veiled. Although, you know, the frequency range is there. I did like it on its original firmware. The original firmware 1.2, where it was limited to 20 watts. So it didn't go that loud. People didn't like it, and that seems to be why they've changed it. Or when there's, oh, it's not like the Xtreme one, doesn't have the punch. So each firmware after that completely changed its sound. But if you get one on firmware 1.2, when it was very clear, had very nice forward vocals, the bass wasn't quite as overblown. It was a really nice listen, at low volumes even, indoors. It's not anymore. They've changed the whole nature of the speaker, clearly. They know their market, but for me, it's gone the wrong way. So anyway, I hope you got something out of my video, and thank you for watching.
UK